What's new, 802? I'm Becca Hammond, and you are listening to Burlington Talks. Burlington Talks may include graphic or explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. In this episode, I'll be interviewing one of my coworkers from my wonderful job, Jenna Brisson. Jenna is a wedding and pet photographer. She once drove a vehicle in Michelle Obama's motorcade. And she is the proud owner of 5 fur babies, 3 cats and 2 dogs. Jenna, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Jenna, and I own a wedding photography business. I primarily photograph weddings and elopements, and I'll do engagement sessions and proposal sessions, which are often a surprise. Those are pretty fun to photograph, actually. And I've just recently, within the last year, started a very new pet photography lifestyle business, which is slow to start, mostly because I'm so busy with weddings, but I love animals, and if anybody knows me, they would agree that I'm kind of a animal obsessed. So I figured it'd be fun to photograph that on the side as like a fun-filled activity.
That's so much fun. Yeah. Any kind of animal, as long as they'll kind of hold still.
I mean, I guess.
Someone's going to
Can you imagine like a lifestyle iguana?
Yes, or their hamster.
People love their animals. Honestly, I'd photograph anything as long as it's not like a slug that I have to touch.
Right. Okay, so as long as you don't have to touch the gross animal.
Yeah, then I'm into it. If it's like a nice animal, I'll photograph it. But I started photography kind of for fun. I took a film class in high school, and then I never really had the money for a DSLR camera. And my sister-in-law is a family photographer, and it kind of re-sparked the interest for me once I met my husband. And after we got married, he bought me a kind of intro, I think it was a T5i Canon Rebel camera. And I started just photographing random stuff, mostly our life, which was essentially our pets because I don't have any kids yet. So that's kind of how it started for me. And I just figured that's where my primary interest was originally with animals. And I'm really comfortable with them. I don't know if that's because I'm an only child or not, but I figured I'd keep that love alive a little bit.
You said you photograph elopements. How does that work?
Yeah, so I would say there's probably 2 categories as far as elopements go. There are elopements where it's just the couple and me, and I'm the only other person there, which is probably the true sense of an elopement. And then there's like an intimate wedding style elopement, which is where the couple has planned to get married somewhere with like 10 to 20 of their closest friends and family. So it is a little bit planned, but it's not a regular wedding, and I'm not sure. I've just been calling them intimate weddings.
Right.
So I guess it's both. Or sometimes they'll just let their family know they're eloping. You can come if you want, but usually it's a small crowd.
Right. And they might not do all the traditional wedding things.
They often don't. But I think it's really fun. Usually, and this is very kind of generically stated, but usually the elopements and intimate weddings are very much more focused on the couple in almost a selfish way that I love, where they don't really care if their parents want them to cut a cake or not, and they won't do it if they don't want to, or
right.
All that kind of stuff. They kind of filter out all the fluff, which can be beautiful. I love regular weddings. I don't want to discount that at all, but there's a place for both, and I think there's a really beautiful energy with a smaller crowd.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot different. I've never been to something that small before. I've been to a kind of small wedding, but not 20 people. That must be very intimate. Just a different feel about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard not to feel like I'm intruding a little bit, but I think that if you feel comfortable with the couple that's hired you, it's much more welcoming. Just this weekend, actually, I photographed 2 women that got married down in Waitsfield, and they rented out a whole inn. They had 20 of their closest friends and family. They didn't even invite spouses because they wanted it to be really small with people they loved really specifically, and that was really beautiful. And I felt kind of like friends with them, which is nice, which is kind of how I feel actually with most of the couples that I end up working with. I'm really specific in my marketing for that reason, because I often think the better I connect with them, the better their photographs will be and the more comfortable they'll feel, which is really important overall.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am not someone who takes good photographs. Jenna works with me, and she took a photograph with me, and I could almost feel it. It's like, oh, I'm doing so badly right now. I don't know how to sit, and I hold my head in a very funny way.
Well, I have to say that I tell every couple I talk to, and you too, that literally everyone thinks they're terrible at getting their photograph taken. it feels awkward. It feels awkward for me. It feels awkward for most photographers, unless you're like a model that does that for work. I think it's going to feel weird. But I tell people all the time when I talk to them that usually if they feel comfortable around me first, it'll be easier. And then if something looks awkward, I'll tell you. Right. But it never feels great. And if it does, you're usually just not paying attention to me. Those are kind of the moments that feel really comfortable. And even like during even a short session, I usually tell people it's going to feel awkward most of the time, even for a wedding sometimes. But overall, you'll get something that looks good, even if it felt awkward. Right. Because I'm catching kind of the awkward moment, but then the laugh after the awkward moment. Right. And even a lot of the prompting that I'm giving people is like, nuzzle your cheek onto your partner's cheek and draw a word or something, which feels awkward, but then you're kind of laughing because they drew like, I don't know, cat or something like kind of basic, but it's a funny activity and that kind of creates a more authentic emotional response.
Right. Yeah, I always appreciate candid shots that just, even if they're not really candid, but they feel candid. Yeah. Where people are laughing. That's why those jump shots are always so much fun, because I feel like as soon as everyone does that, they've lost any hang-ups they have. Or the awkward face. I think a lot of it is just getting people kind of distracted from thinking about what I'm doing. And if they can kind of take their energy somewhere else, like to their partner or to their friends, they won't think about it as much and they won't make that funny face that we all make when we stare at a camera too long. Yes. Yeah, we all have that. And I think it's like, what do I look like right now? Like, do I look silly? Do I look stupid? Do I look hot right now? Like, what is my exterior image to the world? So you just have this funny attitude going on. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. So how far ahead do you book? So I've already booked 2 weddings for 2021, actually. Oh, wow. I would say that most of my wedding photographer and vendor friends would probably agree that 2020 booked really early this year. I'm like 3/4 of the way full. I have 12 weddings, and I'll probably only take maybe 15. Yep. But it varies for different people. Some people do 25. It just depends on how much time you want to spend and how many photos you want to edit. Right, yeah, because so if you did a standard wedding where you have all of the standard wedding things where they toss the bouquet and they do all the dances, how long does that take you to edit? Yeah, so my average package is about 8 hours of coverage, and that includes an engagement session. The engagement session obviously is separate, and I edit those separately. It's about an hour photographing, sometimes an hour and a half, and then it probably takes me about 3 to 5 hours to edit them and then deliver. But I usually leave some space in between shooting the session and then editing, more so because creatively it's nice to get a break from looking at something that you just created. Right. Sometimes I'll shoot a session and I'll go home and I'm like, meh. I don't know, and then later I'm like, oh, these are really awesome. But I need some mental space from it, I think, to allow myself to see it in a more objective way. Right. It's really easy to be a really harsh critic when you're any kind of entrepreneur or creative. Yes. So the struggle is real. As far as a regular wedding goes, I probably shoot anywhere. Sometimes I'll have a second photographer with me. More often than not, someone else is shooting with me. And I'll end up editing all the photos they take, too. I'll take their cards home with me. And this summer, I think a wedding I shot the most photos at was an 8-hour wedding, 6,800 images. Wow. I think I delivered about 1,600, which is a lot. I usually guarantee at least 700. But you have to cull through all those photos, which takes about an hour and a half, just going through and picking ones that you like. And then all of the editing, gosh, it's probably like 15 to 20 hours. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. Because every single photo, you're retouching and making it look as good as possible, right? Yeah. So every camera you shoot in what's called a raw mode, usually, if you're a professional photographer. And it gets as much information in the image as possible, but it doesn't come out looking like a beautiful picture. It's usually a little bit duller. The colors aren't always correct. So you have to go through each and every image and kind of make it look as beautiful as it did in person. Yeah, and that's... I have taken pictures, and I know how bad they look. Like, that's not what I was looking at. So, and even the DSLRs, because I've seen people who are incredibly talented take the shot, and then they'll show it to me. And I'm kind of like, meh. And then they'll show it to me after they finished with Photoshop, and it's like, wow, that's a great picture. But you didn't even tell, like, I couldn't tell with my non-trained eye how beautiful it was going to be. Yeah, I think some of that is kind of in the way that you learn what the camera is able to recover from an image. And then you kind of go into the shoot picturing it that way almost to make it maximize how beautiful the photos can look.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
But it is a lot of work. So I'd say 15 to 20 hours for a regular wedding. And then, of course, if you're going to blog the wedding, that's another X amount of time because you have to choose the images that you like and then blog about the couple. And there's a lot of email communication, etc.
Is that something you do? Do you just kind of pick and choose who you're going to make a blog post about?
Yeah, so I try to blog most of them. I usually end up in the beginning of the year, I'll blog kind of most of them as I go because it's usually a little slower in the spring. So I'll blog most of them if it kind of fits with the general theme of my brand, which most do because the couples I end up finding are really cool, which is lucky. But once August hits, August, September, October are usually the busiest months of the year here for wedding photographers or weddings in general. And you get a little backlogged. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I have weddings from earlier in the fall that I haven't blogged yet, but it also kind of leads like a good chunk of work to be done in the winter and kind of fresh material for your website. So I don't guarantee I'm going to blog any of them. I try to blog as many as I can on time, but that's not always the case. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people.
Right.
It's just a lot of work.
And honestly, I mean, you take 1 week, you have the wedding on the weekend, and then you're editing forever, and then you have another wedding almost the next
exactly
weekend.
And that's kind of why you don't end up doing all of it. And it's nice to have stuff to do in the winter to show work through your blog.
Right.
I didn't word that well, but it's nice to have work to show in the winter.
Right, because it still looks like you're producing something. And I'm sure the couples that you're making the blog post about, because you don't guarantee it, and you do it a few months later, they're probably stoked about it. Like,
yeah,
oh,
it's
cool,
kind of fun to relive the moment. Yeah. Yep, I don't usually give them a certain time that I'll do it, but a lot of people love it because then they can share that with their friends and family. So I try to do it as often as I can, but my primary goal is to get them the gallery so they can have the images as soon as possible.
Right. I should have asked this earlier, but how long ago did you start taking pictures?
So I took that film class in college, and then I think, let me think about this for a second. I've had my business under my name for 3 years, so probably about 4 or 5 years ago. The year before I started my business, my sister-in-law, Christy Dooley, the family photographer, she had a local friend who's a wedding vendor or photographer named Amy Bennett, and she needed a second photographer, so I worked with her. That's kind of how I got started. She just needed someone to help shoot kind of supplemental imagery at her weddings.
Right.
And I didn't actually know that I liked shooting weddings until I started working with her, and I shot probably close to 20 weddings with her that first summer. And then I just decided that it was something I really loved and wanted to do kind of on my own.
Yeah.
So I've had my own business for 3 years, and that was the year before. So probably almost 5 years.
I'm impressed.
Something like that.
Your photos look amazing.
Thank you.
I always think of photography as being something that you have to focus on, and it's like a lifelong skill, and you build it.
I think it probably is. But isn't that true of any creative?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing though that you can start and have a business in a couple years and actually be good at what you do.
I feel pretty lucky, honestly. And I think some of it is I got to work as a second shooter for so long, but you don't make that much money. The average, I think, around here is maybe $50 an hour. It depends based on your experience level.
Right.
But shooting a wedding is also a lot of work and a lot of time on Saturdays when maybe your spouse isn't working. So after a while, it was fun, but it wasn't my clientele. There were people that were attracted to work with Amy, which was wonderful. She has really beautiful work if anyone wants to check it out. But I just kind of wanted to have my own say over what I wanted to do in my business. And it's really fun. It's a lot of work, but it's super fun. And I think the rate at which your business grows very much depends on how much hustle you put into it.
Yeah.
And my husband would probably agree that he hasn't really seen me in about that 3 years. So it's slowing down a little bit now that I'm prioritizing my time a little bit better. But when you first start a business, as maybe you feel with this podcast, it's an overwhelming amount of excitement and an overwhelming amount of knowledge and like things you feel like you need to do all the time. And I constantly feel like as an entrepreneur, my head is just spinning full of stuff.
Right. Ideas.
It's like a
lists.
tornado of words and lists. And one of my goals this year is to kind of have a better system for like jotting some of that down so I don't spin it around my brain so much. But it's really fun. I'm really lucky. I work a 9-to-5 job. As Becca mentioned, we work together. And I've surpassed my office job income in 2 years, which was pretty cool. So
That's amazing.
I don't like to brag about it, but it feels like kind of one way to measure how successful I am. And it feels good to kind of get somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And just having the bookings. Like,
Yeah.
people are actually interested in having you come
Yeah.
photograph their wedding, which is so great.
Yeah, and it's cool when they kind of reach out to you and say they love your work versus, they're just looking for a photographer. What's your price? Because there are different
Yes.
types of people out there. There are people that are price shopping, and I think most people are. It's expensive, and having a wedding in general is really pricey. But it feels really good when you have clients that are attracted to your work and care a lot about the process and the actual aesthetic of it and you as a human. It's kind of a more wholesome experience.
Right, where they're not just coming, are you the cheapest in town?
Yes.
No, then get out.
Which is fine. And I tell people, too, there's a photographer out there for anyone. There's probably more than 20 wedding photographers in Vermont, but we also
Yeah,
probably,
easily, I'm sure.
I think I read somewhere maybe last year that we have something like 5,500 weddings a year. Don't quote me because I'm not sure if that's exact fact, but something like that. There's a lot. We're a big touristy state.
Yep.
So a lot of people are coming here to get married. So I usually tell people there's no shortage of weddings, and it's nice to be kind to other photographers.
Oh, yeah. It's funny, this area, I think I talked about it with James Lockridge from Big Heavy World. We were talking about musicians specifically. In Burlington, the musicians don't really compete the same way they do in other places. We're much more help each other out. What can we do to help each other? If I can't do it, can you do the show? And I feel like that vibe and culture is true of most different sectors of culture. So I could see that in photography, that people here would probably not be so, I'm just, no, our pictures are terrible, don't hire them. Or, that attitude that happens in big cities, we don't get as much of here.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a gem. Yeah, I've heard that from other people too. And I would say that, honestly, I'm friends with a lot of the photographers in town, and it's really nice because eventually you can just send referrals directly to each other. And my friend Danielle Allendorf, she's also a wedding photographer locally. She and I run a local networking group through the Rising Tide Society. It's called the Tuesdays Together group. And I'll link that for you. Maybe you can put it in the show notes.
Yes,
but it's basically geared towards really any entrepreneur. Our group tends to be a little bit wedding vendor focused just because that's kind of who leads it and that's who started it. But it's a good space for you to network with other entrepreneurs. And there's a monthly topic. I think this one is vision setting and goal casting or vision casting, something like that. So we're going to get together next Monday and chat about kind of what our plan is for 2020. And it's a good space to ask questions of other people. There are a lot of things you have to learn when you start your own business, like how to be an accountant, how to market yourself, a lot of things I didn't know. And so it's nice to kind of have a supportive group like that. And overall, I'd say the whole entire wedding vendor community is really kind here. I think we are lucky.
Yeah, very much. I was lucky enough when I was a kid. I worked one of the wedding venue. It was just wedding show at the Sheridan.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just running around getting food orders for all the different vendors. But the people there were so nice. That was one of the most fun things I did when I was working as a kid. Because all of the people were so happy and so friendly, and having a wedding is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So I think hopefully, typically, you're going to not walk into a bad situation. It's going to be a happy situation. People are mostly going to be having fun, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only stressful part sometimes are family dynamics, but usually those are pretty easy to work around. And everyone has them. So I would just remind couples, if you're feeling awkward about divorced parents, let me know and we just work around it,
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I've got to ask, have you ever had a wedding where it was just like, oh no, things are going wrong?
I haven't had any specifically where something technically for me is going wrong, but I have had a wedding maybe with a difficult parent, which I will not detail because people will know. But there was a wedding maybe where one of the parents was being kind of difficult with one of the planners. And I think that might have been a challenge, but I just kind of kill people with kindness as much as possible in my personal life, but definitely professionally, because there's no sense in being dramatic or catty or rude. It doesn't ever get you what you want. So I'm usually just nice to everyone, and so far that's worked.
That's good. Yeah, that's very good. I've heard of some weddings where the wedding itself falls apart, and then I don't know, what would you do if you were a photographer? Do you take pictures of the ensuing chaos, or do you just kind of stop?
Yeah, I think it depends on what goes down specifically. And also at that point, contractually, I'm obligated. I get to keep the money, right? But then you feel weird. I haven't had anything like that happen.
Right.
Knock on all the wood around me. But I'm sure that's a thing. And I'm sure it's happened to other photographers.
Yeah, I won't go into details either. My sister was in a wedding where the whole family started screaming at each other just in the middle. And it was not good. And I don't know if they had a real photographer, but I've always wondered how the people who were supposed to be professionally working that wedding would have handled that. It's just mind-boggling. Luckily, though, for the most part, everyone's really happy and positive, and it's a good thing that you're there and you're helping them take pictures of a happy day.
Yeah, most of the time people can kind of put their stuff away for the people getting married, but there's always, people that can't do that. Luckily, it hasn't ruined anything for me yet.
Right. If it ever does happen, I think you should just snap the pictures, just go for
photojournalism.
Accelerates. This is as the situation unfolded.
I definitely photograph kids when they're crying because that's like every wedding ever.
That's amazing. Do you give those photos to the couple?
Sometimes I do. So kind of my approach in general, I tell people I'm a little bit photojournalistic and I will take pictures of stuff like that, but I also really enjoy like a really beautiful portrait. So I'm kind of an interesting mix between like posed portraiture that involves kind of candid prompting, but I also will kind of photograph, something real.
Right.
Because that's actual real life.
Right.
And I'm not usually trying to make stuff look perfect when it's not. So if it is really beautiful and perfect, I will photograph it and I'll put you in better lighting, but I'm not going to make your whole day look like something it wasn't.
Right. Which is good. Like, you don't want to get your pictures back and have them be so photoshopped that you don't recognize what's happening.
Yeah, you want it to be real. And usually I luck out because the couples I'm working with kind of reflect that. It's when you put something out there, you get that kind of thing back towards you. The law of attraction or whatever they say.
Right.
So I've been lucky that I worked with a lot of couples that are kind of just there to have a good time and they're not as obsessed with what their napkin color is. And if it's wrong, they're not going to ruin their whole day.
Right. They're not going to start crying.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes. And there's a photographer for that kind of person, but it's not me.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the feeling I got from looking at your website. So I love your website, by the way. It's got such a good vibe to it and just happy and pretty, but not overly artificial, like this, businessy, where you're just pushing I sell photos. Look at how good they are. It's more of like a vibe.
I'm trying to be relatable and real, but like also show beautiful work, which I think is sometimes hard to do. Curating your own work for your website is really challenging. I have a hard time. I probably shot 50 to 70,000 pictures last year. I didn't deliver that many because you take a bunch and you deliver a small amount, but
right.
It's hard at the end of the year to go through and update your website and pick your favorite ones because there are just so many.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure it's not like you're delivering bad quality photos.
Right.
Every one you deliver is going to be good.
Yeah. And you're trying to kind of evoke the feeling of a new customer on your website as someone that you want to attract. So you have to think about kind of what you want to put out there and what you'd like to photograph again. And if it's something you don't want to photograph again, you're not going to put it on your website.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to advertise something you don't want to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great website.
Thanks.
I'm trying to think of the word I wanted to use here because I did read through it. And as soon as I hit it, it was like you want to be their friend.
Perfect.
That's
so
what it felt like. Like you want to be part of the wedding and be a friend, not so much like I'm a professional and I don't want to know anything about you. You want to talk to them and get to know them so that you do a good job with what they want with their wedding.
Yeah, for me it matters. I like to get to know them. I think it helps me photograph them better, but I will say that's not how every photographer feels, so I don't want people to think that's true of everyone. There are some photographers that are a little more businessy and I don't need to know you to photograph a nice picture of you, but it helps me feel more invested in your day, I think, which ultimately does kind of lead to a better, more emotive picture maybe.
Yeah.
And I feel more comfortable with you, which I think allows me to kind of ask you to do different stuff the day of, etc.
Right.
Plus it's more fun for me, selfishly.
I'm sure. But if you couldn't, if you weren't comfortable asking someone to draw on their chin, like you were saying, then it probably, can you do this? And they look at you funny and it's really awkward when they do it. Yeah, I could see that.
Then you just have a whole lot of awkward.
It'd be funny though. Just the most, someone should do that. Make just all of the most awkward wedding photos ever taken and just an album.
There must be a thread on Reddit for that.
There's
or
gotta
something.
be
Or like
something,
BuzzFeed.
right? That would be good. Okay.
I'm sure it's out there.
I'm sure it is too. What is the hardest part of taking photos?
As far as a wedding goes, maybe.
Sure. Or just in general, since you do
general.
different types of photography.
I think when I first started my business, I would say making sure clients were comfortable and felt good during the session was hard because you have to kind of get a workflow going. I say a lot of the same things to couples now, but just because those are the things that tend to work to help them feel the most comfortable. But in the beginning, you have so many nerves. Sometimes it kind of takes over and you forget technically like which buttons to push. Really early on, that's the most stressful part, but that's gone for me now. And I usually am just excited because it's fun and I have muscle memory for all the buttons and I don't really need to look at the camera anymore, which is helpful. But I would say now the most challenging part is just kind of the physical stress that it takes. I was in a car accident earlier this year. And even before that happened, I would say that physically carrying 2 cameras and other equipment for 8 hours on a wedding day is like physically demanding. And sometimes you wake up the next morning and kind of feel like you have a hangover even though you don't because you can't drink a ton of water because it's like very limited times you can go to the bathroom.
Right.
You're on your feet all day and you don't really eat like a standard meal sometimes until dinner. It's just kind of it's a weird work day.
Yeah.
It's super fun and it's kind of like you're in a rom-com, but it's physically demanding.
Yeah, I'm sure you can't really put the camera down because the second you do, someone's going to do something you wish you got a picture of, I'm sure.
Yeah, if you have a second shooter, it's nice because you can kind of be like, hop on this for 2 minutes and I'll be right back. But a lot of the time you don't want to miss much of what's going on. And people try to cram so much in their wedding day that there's not a lot of downtime. Usually it's the opposite. Usually you run out of time and you just have to choose what's most important to them.
Yep.
So I think that can be challenging. But I would say physically it's hard because after you shoot the wedding, you're a little bit tired, but I would say the next, however many hours you're spending editing is also taking a pretty big toll on your neck. And like,
yes,
I don't think my posture is the best. My husband would probably agree, but it's just challenging. And so since the car accident, I've noticed this more because my neck muscles are still kind of recovering and I'm fine, but that's been the most challenging part of this year specifically, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like hard work. I guess I never realized weddings are 8 hours long, but if they do, especially if they do the shoot in between the actual ceremony and the reception, that adds a lot of time, which it's funny because some weddings I've been to, they don't do that. And then when they do, it pushes it so much longer. So I guess I could see it being 8 hours, but man, yeah, that sounds like a lot of work.
Sometimes it depends too. If you have like a very traditional church wedding, they'll sometimes break in the afternoon. I don't have many of those, so usually it's like 12 to 8 or 12 to 9, just straight working hours.
Yep.
So that can be kind of challenging, but it's usually really fun. Last year, I ended up mixing a lot of Gatorade with water, which I think helped quite a bit, so I'll continue that. Gatorade, if you're listening, you can sponsor me if you want to.
The photographer of Gatorade.
That'd be great.
That would actually be a really cool job. I wonder what they would... What would you take pictures of? Just people drinking Gatorade?
Yeah, just like me modeling with my Gatorade water.
That's probably I'm sure Gatorade has a photographer.
I'm sure they do.
Probably have.
I don't know if I'm cool enough yet for that. But I'd take free Gatorade. That's the point.
Right. What was your Burlington area origin story? I'm not sure if you're from this exact location.
Sure. So I grew up in Ludlow, Vermont, which is about 2 hours south where Okemo Mountain is. It's literally a 1-stoplight town. Very charming, very little to do there. So a lot of the time we had to drive 30 minutes north or south growing up to do anything cool, which was really only a movie theater, Denny's at midnight. And I think that was about it. There's not a lot going on down there. And somehow I always joke I turned out pretty normal. I'm also an only child. But anyway, turned out fine. It's really beautiful there, but there's not a lot going on, as I said. So I went to college at UVM. And then after college, I worked for Senator Leahy's campaign, actually. And I moved to D.C. for a little while, but then I ended up just realizing it wasn't the right fit for me. It's really beautiful and it's a cool city to visit, but the kind of vibe of the people there is very different than here. And I would say I found that even traveling, it's kind of the same case. People here really care about other people and they're nice. And every time I visit a big city, I smile at strangers and then I realize that that's not something people do.
Yeah. Oh, I do the exact same thing. I smile at people and then you get a very weird reaction in the cities, and then you almost feel like, oh God, I really shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, every time.
And it's just a smile. Like, I never would have thought that people are so angry other places.
So
I
angry.
smile at everyone here when I pass them on the street. Mm-hmm. Don't do that when you go to Montreal. I'm warning you.
Yeah, I know. I have a photographer friend that lives in New York City, and so I'll visit her usually once a year, and I'm always walking down the street and I'll just smile, and then I very quickly realize that's not something people do. But anyway, so I moved back to Vermont because I love it here, and I've been here since then. I probably was only in D.C. for 9 months or so. So I've been in Vermont most of my life. And my other half, Mark, he went to Champlain, and we met after college through mutual friends. But we just decided to stay here for now because we really love it. It's beautiful. The winter is maybe a month too long for me, but making it work.
Yeah, I think it's a month too long for everybody. Yeah. It might just be a Vermont thing, but we all complain about the weather so much.
Like every day.
But we all love it so much here, but we hate the weather.
Yeah.
We just want the snow to go away.
Yep. Just like one or 2 months.
See, but I wouldn't trade warmth for jerky people.
Me either. I think that's why we're still here.
Yeah, like I will stay cold as long as I can smile at you. It's fine. What is your favorite part of being in the area?
Gosh, I think probably the combination of the people because they're really nice. And I honestly think if I was stranded somewhere, I would feel really comfortable almost anywhere in Vermont asking for help, which is a really good feeling. But also we have really good food here, and I like eating.
Yeah, Burlington rocks the food.
So much good food.
We really do. It's amazing how much different culture we have in this little city because 99% of Vermont has no culture except for our standard woodchuck backwoods culture. That is like, we have a wood stove, we tap trees, like that's like Vermont culture. Mm-hmm. But in Burlington, we have everything. You can get any type of food you want pretty much here. I'm sure there's some exceptions, but yeah, it's like a little cultural melting pot. Which is
and it's
so
all
cool.
pretty good, which is nice too. I feel like every time I travel somewhere, there's good food in other places, but it's not as readily available as it is here, unless you're in like a hip city.
Right, like a major city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
it's not like you're going to go down to like West Lab and get...
Yeah.
Like, you'll probably get like a good Thai house, but you're probably not going to have good Japanese, or you're not going to have...
Yeah, there's like one cool thing in the smaller towns.
Exactly.
But even outside of Vermont, there's just not as much sometimes. So it makes me appreciate what we have here for such a small community.
And it's thriving, too. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of plugging how great it is because I love this area. And it really is. Like, every different market, it's crazy how low our unemployment rate is right now. And everyone's trying so hard to work together in this community and make different events that are combining, like, hey, music, art, photography. We're going to get everyone together. We're going to have a band play. Now Foam's making beer cans with artist work on them to sponsor a band in town.
Cool.
So, like, three-way, like, it's so cool. There's so many different ways that people are combining to make Burlington so much cooler.
It's really clever and very good marketing, too.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like, even the wedding industry, guys you're already doing it because you're already networking, but yeah, just combining where you're like, hey, I already know these caterers or these guys are great to work with. I've worked with them before. You can just kind of offer up.
Yep. And couples ask you too. So
I'm sure
if you don't offer it up, they'll ask you anyway, which is fine. But it's nice that we're also nice to each other because even if I don't know, I usually tell couples I can ask a friend and they'll know someone that's good. Right. There are a lot of wedding vendors here, so I don't know all of them, but that's the beauty of nice people.
Yeah, and the more you get to know them, too, and the more people you know, it's, well, I don't really do that, but I know this person who does do that, or whatever thing that they want done for them. You actually know someone because you've worked with them before, or just know of them. So, yeah, it's great. I love Burlington so much.
I know, me too. There are a lot of really good things about living here.
Yeah, it's funny because I keep asking people that question, and I keep kind of getting the same answer. We all love it. I kind of need to expand out a little more and think of another tier to ask, go a little further on that one.
No, I think it's a good question.
Can you tell me a story about the most fun you've ever had shooting a wedding?
Oh, man. I have two recent kind of, I don't want to say favorites because I really enjoy all of them, but kind of maybe like slightly more exciting opportunities. So last year, both in May, actually, I had a couple that asked me to document their elopement. So it was just them and me. And I ended up being their temporary officiant as well because there was no one else there. So they paid for me to have a temporary officiant form filled out. So we hiked the mountain together, and I took pictures of them at sunset reading vows together. And it was funny because on the way up, they obviously didn't want to wear their wedding gear, so they had backpacks on, and they both changed behind like little tiny pine trees at the top of the mountain. It was really beautiful, and I cried a little bit, and I actually had to hold back from like heaving crying, which I find myself doing a lot, like realizing that people will hear me if I audibly cry, and so I have to really kind of zone it in and hone it back in. Yeah, because you don't want to be the photographer that people are talking about. Yeah, I'm actually not even a big crier, but something about those like key moments at weddings are so real and so raw and really beautiful, and that's kind of the general excitement I have photographing weddings, is that those are moments that are really important to people, and it's really, really fun to document them. So that was one of my favorite elopements from last year. Again, if any of my clients are listening, I really loved all of them. But another really fun wedding for me was my husband and I went to Jamaica, not Vermont, the country, and we photographed a small wedding there with a couple, and that was really fun. It was a really good time. They got married on a small island that was just off of the resort, owned by the resort. And at the end of the night, the bride and groom jumped in the pool in their gear, and all their friends jumped in this little tiny pool bar, and they were dancing on the stools of the bar, and it was just really fun. It was a really good time, and I loved that too.
Were they from Vermont and they had their wedding down there?
No, so they are from Rhode Island, and they traveled to Vermont the year before, I think, and she had found me. I actually think someone referred her to me. They just wanted to do a couple shoot. It was just them and their golden retriever. And halfway through the session, he whispered to me, "I have a ring in my pocket." And I was like, oh,
that's exciting.
And usually for proposals, I know ahead of time because one of the people has kind of prepped me and fired me for that, but he didn't. No one mentioned it to me before, so we just kind of I was like, "Do it at this place. I'll be ready to go." And I just had such a good time with them, and we've kind of had a good connection that they wanted to hire me, so they brought me with them. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds like the cutest engagement, too, where they have no idea it's coming. Because I feel like a lot of times you kind of have
sometimes
feeling it's coming.
Yeah. I like to ask people after they've been proposed to if they knew it was coming or not. And some people say no, and some people are like, well, kind of. But it's fun either way to document.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of fun to have pictures of it. I think that's a really trendy thing right now, proposals. But they're fun. I do probably a handful a year, and I really enjoy them. They might be more nerve-wracking than weddings, though, because more often than not, the person proposing, I'll give them instructions, but they pick, the wrong spot. And so a lot of the time, it's me we reenact it after to make sure they're also getting, a decent photo, but I can only be hiding in so many places.
Right.
And I can't talk to them the moments leading up to it.
Because if they see you, they're going to be like, what is going on?
Yeah, why is that person with 2 professional cameras stalking us? So I usually say, on the map, I'll be like, stand here, face this direction. But a lot of the time, the person proposing is so nervous that they sort of, black out almost, and they forget my instructions. And I'm just like, do what you can, I'll photograph what I can, and then we'll if we need to reenact some of it, we can. And more often than not, I have to do that.
I'm sure. Well, a lot of girls, as soon as they see the ring, are probably not like, I'm going to hold still and smile. They're going to jump or move or just not be in a great position for taking a picture.
Yeah, and it's actually fine if they do that, but more often than not, the person proposing will pick a weird direction or a direction that doesn't have really good lighting. And so sometimes it's challenging because I won't be able to get to the perspective I want to see the other person's reaction.
Right.
So that can be kind of difficult, but yeah.
That sounds like so much fun though, because it's such a happy thing, happy moment in people's lives.
Yeah, most of them are really fun, and I have a hard time choosing favorites because so many times when I leave a wedding or an elopement, I feel so connected to the couple and so happy for them that it feels like I've become friends with them. So part of that's challenging, but that also makes so many of them my favorite experience at the same time because I really authentically feel very connected to them. And I think a lot of couples would probably agree if they were being interviewed right now that they kind of go home from the wedding and say like, oh, Jenna feels like we're friends. And some of them want to come back and get a beer with me, and I love that. I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Like you were saying, those intimate moments at weddings, they're so special. And even I've been dragged to weddings with people I don't really know. Even those moments with people I don't know at all, you want to cry for them. It's just such an emotional, powerful experience that even just doing that, and I don't know them at all, and I'm not their photographer, I feel like I know them a little better. So I'm sure taking the actual pictures, especially of the engagement too, you are their friend, I'm sure.
Yeah, you get really invested emotionally, I think, in a good way. And then you spend another 20 hours editing their wedding. So I'm just like staring at them for hours, which sounds so creepy when I say that out loud, but that's kind of how it works. And then by the time I give the gallery, I'm like, oh, goodbye. Like, I hope I see you again.
Right. I've seen you for so long.
Yeah, come back to me.
Oh, that's funny. So I've got all your contact details, but would you like to share them with people, how they could get in touch with you if they're interested in seeing your photography? What should they do?
Sure. So my website is www.jennabrisson.com. It'll be on the show notes, so I don't think I need to spell it. But same deal on Instagram at jenna.brisson. I think that's it. I think I have a Pinterest. I don't use it that often. That's where you can find me.
Yeah, probably just go on your website.
Yeah,
shoot you
website's the easiest, yeah. Or I'm on Instagram pretty often. I might be a partial addict. So if you don't want to email me, you can DM me.
Right. And I'm sure, is it a mix of just professional photography on your Instagram, or is it a mix of your own personal photography too?
That's a real struggle. That's a struggle of a question. I've been trying to add a little bit more personal work in there. I often will put a picture of myself because I think people want to know what I look like. Oh, yeah. You'll find a lot more personal stuff in my stories because sometimes, as vain as it sounds, a lot of photographers or really any business owner has like an aesthetic to their feed, right? So if it doesn't match that, I'll probably put it in my story or something. Or I also have a personal one you guys can creep on if you want to. You'll find it in the bio on my Instagram.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
That one's mostly dog photos, though.
And the dog photos are adorable. You should all go check out the dog photos. And Jenna took pictures of someone we work with's cats, actually, 2 cats. They were so cute. You should definitely check them out if you want pictures of your pets. Jenna will do a very good job taking pictures of your pets. Thank you so much for being on the show today. This was lots of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Woo! Thanks again to Jenna for being on the show. I learned a lot about the wedding photography business, and I hope you did too. Get in touch with Jenna if you are a chill person looking for a chill and talented photographer to take some photos. Check out the show notes page to see some of Jenna's works and links to anything we discussed today. burlingtontalks.com/08 will take you there. Subscribe to the show and tell your friends about it. If you have something interesting to talk about, I want to interview you, my contact details are on burlingtontalks.com. You can now support the show by clicking the support link at the top of the website. I'm looking for new podcast music. I'm really hoping that a Vermont musician will be interested in helping me create 30 seconds or so of music that I can use for the intro and outro of the podcast. Get in touch with me. Send me files. I want to hear them. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to my show today. It means so much to me to keep seeing the numbers grow and just keep seeing that people in the area are really interested in it and that all of the people I reach out to really do want to be interviewed. It's great. So thanks so much to everybody. That's what's new in the 802. Becca out.